One, when we say that it's okay to be something, anything, that implies that the furthest we are able to take a value assessment of a particular situation is through a form of resignation of that idea. It's okay for me to not be perfect. It's okay that I commit mistakes. It's okay that I am where I am right now. The unique problem, though, that comes as a result of this motion happening is in the choice that you are okay with making. And I think this is where side government is really misinformed about their entire strategy of the case. Let me be clear. All of government's case is true only in isolation and only if you believe in the best case scenario for people and how relationships operate in the real world. The problem with that is that no one is literally ever that assured of their own personal preference. And if we forfeit and just be okay with it, then it leaves those with a limited agency at a vulnerable position to be taken advantage of. That is to say, all of the negative case lines that we have said have not really been sufficiently responded to as of late. Before I get into the main metrics by which you should weigh this debate, a few important rebuttals that I think are incredibly important. One, PM, DPM, and WHIP have the broad general case line that relationships of this sort is going to be supportive and very guidance-based. This was never really proven. They just assume that is the case because, that's how relationships should operate. But let's say they did prove it, and let's assume that that assertion was proven to be true. Note how fucking crazy this is, right? I'm sure everyone here in this debate room, in some capacity, has had a relationship before. Just by virtue of you being in a real experience with another person, the world that PM and DPM gives is absurd. It's absurd because, one, human beings are not perfect. Even in 100 to 100 relationships where both people do indeed try, things are always lost in translation. So support may be expected of each other, but it's not a given all of the time. Two, as to what both my partners have said, the more and more autonomy that you willingly give up as a submissive or as a person on a leash, the harder it is for you as the owner of that particular leash to take account of the opinion of the submissive and literally cater to them more. So when PM says that it's going to be an incredibly communicative relationship, what LO and PLO point out very structurally is that probably that's not going to be the case. Two, government has a very narrow interpretation of this motion. If you're mentally impaired or mentally incapacitated in some form or another, this motion does not apply to you. Because obviously, if you don't have autonomy to choose, then it's not a decision that you willingly subscribe to. Therefore, you cannot have that particular act be credited within the context of the round. Technically, if a government bench only operates on this particular frame, then there's literally zero debate because this is what already happens on either side of the house. B, it's not just all about love and support because people even in relationships have perverse incentives that are not always, actually romantic. Sorry for that noise. E.g., other things like kinks and sex stuff happens on our side. The obvious problem here is that consent is not always clear and people have a very high capacity to fuck up. Two main clashes and questions in this debate. One, where is both dom and sub better off in their relationship? Two, where are relationships broadly better off? One, where is sub and dom better off? Government says it's likely to be healthy. Opposition says there's a lot of potential abuse towards it. Where do the both sides clash? Government says that people will automatically be responsible for their partner. Note the only resemblance of a mechanization to this particular point is on the case that people love their partner and genuinely appreciate that. How does Joseph already deal with this? A, different people have different tendencies which do not always make them capable of handling a partner on a leash. B, people get their expectations confused the moment in which this dynamic changes their perception of their partner because now you have the burden of doing everything. They have the particular burden of being a pet. E.g., if you spend time making all of the decisions, you are just less likely to listen to your partner because of how the responsibilities are literally set. E.g., that is what my leader of the opposition literally POI'd to the whip, of which was literally strawman by the whip in his response to. What then does that do in the context of this round? It gives reasonable doubt to government's main principle that these people are likely to be caring and supportive all of the time. insofar as government just decides to be dismissive of this particular point, then I think we have given you more persuasive material in regards to saying that it's probably not okay given all of the potential harms that come as a consequence of it. Isaiah's extension is brilliant because it highlights how the mindset of each person, specifically in these particular situations, change and how that leads to less communicative action and less consent being taken into account. He explained that people are not static individuals. They don't always think about how they should cater their partner. As a consequence of them subscribing to this particular form, it becomes just significantly more harder for them to operate under this lens. These two things, or these four things, have been set as early as our leader of the opposition. Government has been incredibly dismissive up until whip. Panel, Gov needs to be mutually exclusive. If one person is the controller, they can't be controlled. On the converse, if one person is a sub and the control, then they cannot be the controller and have their opinions equally taken into account. Gov cannot have their cake and eat it. Two, on how society and relationships change. Note, a lot of the extension that Isaiah gave was also to the same capacity in Joseph's speech, and that is to say, Gov equally decided to not respond to any of them. This means that on government side, sure, you might have a happy couple every now and then, but subtle abuse gets normalized, more coercive actions gets more normalized, breaching of consent happens to a far greater extent, becomes more neutral, more normalized on their side of the house. So, on our side of the house, I think this is where government whip tried to understand our point but failed to do so. It is true that relationships are never 50-50 or 100 to 100, but that is the narrative and perception that we would rather take on our side of the house. That is to say, if you say that you're not okay with being on the leash, then that means you fall under our comparative of believing in equal relationships. There's just more discussion on healthy opportunities on side opposition. Because if you really listen to all of government speeches, their impacts are literally our impacts, except a lot less likely to happen because of the risks that we have imposed onto you. For all of those reasons, I really hope you guys understood what I said. Thank you.